All right. Well, welcome back, everyone. Hopefully, you had some good nourishment and good conversation. Our next presenters are going to be presenting on for profit. Our first presenter is Dale Kronkright. Dale earned his BA in American Cultural Studies from the University of California at Davis and his postgraduate certificate in conservation at the Peabody Museum at Harvard. He has served as adjunct faculty at the Art Conservation Graduate Program at SUNY Buffalo and as a lecturer at the University of Delaware Wintour Graduate Art Conservation Program. Dale comes to us from the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum. Prior to coming to work for the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum, he was senior conservator for the Museum of New Mexico in Santa Fe for 7 years and was senior conservator at the Regional Conservation Center, Bishop Museum in Honolulu. He has also served as instructor and author for the Getty Conservation Institute from 1985 to 1987. I'm going to turn it over to Dale, and he is going to enlighten us.
No pressure there. So if you do the math, you can figure out how old I am, right? Take all those dates, and you figure I've been at the O'Keeffe Museum since the walls were going up. That's 27 years. So there you go. That's the whole business. But I will talk to you today about my work on art in transit. And Stephen sort of spilled the beans in that early on. I figured I'm going to do my best to keep to 15 minutes. I can talk forever on this stuff, and it's really, oh, good. Yeah, there we go. So in about 2005, I saw some paintings that had come back from transit to Europe, a 3-venue, 1-year show. I had couriered a group of paintings, and so I knew about their handling conditions, the transit conditions, trucks, as well as airplanes. I had data loggers on them for temperature and humidity. They were my very best crates that I could possibly engineer. And when we got them back, there were 2 conditions that worried me. One, there were paintings that had never had cracks before that suddenly had cracks. And they were small, and they were clean, and they were hard to see, but there they were. And then there were paintings that had cracks, and the cracks had gotten larger. And I knew there had not been a single shock, or a single drop, or a single collision impact of any kind. So the question was, okay, how did this happen? And I knew it was probably a fatigue reaction. That is, that something had been adding up and stressing out those areas over a long period of time, and that we had just hit the threshold, right? When the last molecules holding that paint together in that spot gave way. But the question is, what was causing that? And through some research, and I'll discuss a little bit about that, I told our director, I think it's vibration that's doing it. The literature in conservation talks about vibration as being a very low risk because the displacements, the amount of movement that a canvas or any object moves in vibration, just think about a bell. Right? When you ring a bell, you can hear it. If you ring it hard, it's really loud. But you really can't see the walls of the bell moving, and they are moving, right? That's what's pushing the air and causing the sound. So the literature suggested that the movement would be so small it wouldn't do any damage, right? But the damage models, it turns out, from vibration is not only total displacement, but the number of cycles back and forth. And for example, canvas paintings vibrate back and forth between 10 times a second and 60 times a second for every minute of every hour that they are on the road. So when you add that up, that's a lot of cycles, and that builds a lot of fatigue. So our idea was, wow, there could be something in this for both fragile cultural heritage materials that are vibrating in transit, since we want to share our collections with lots and lots of folks all over the world. The O'Keeffe Museum, for example, in Santa Fe is very small. We get about 120,000 people a year. But when we travel an exhibition, we get over 1 million people a year, right? So it's a way of introducing her ideas and the ideas of human history to larger audiences. So we want to do that. Lots of museums want to do that. What if we could solve this vibration problem? Let's set up a for-profit corporation under the umbrella of a nonprofit corporation to try and get investors and develop this idea. So that's how that started. So we've been asked as presenters to try and answer some very important questions for this convening. How do we translate commitments to sustainability into creating, transportation, and art handling solutions? It's a big question. Sharing art is central to art's core purpose of communication, but can we rethink sharing works of art in ways that first prevent damage, so that increases the sustainability of the art itself over a longer period of time, and make the whole effort more sustainable, likewise conserve resources, reduce the carbon emission footprints of our enterprise? Second question is, how can we do that while reducing waste? So we create a lot of waste when we transport. There's woods and foams and insulation panels, all of which are non-serviceable. Like once they give out, and they have to be replaced. So they're non-serviceable, short-lived components that end up in the landfill, right? So how can we improve on that whole process? And then reuse has been a reliable way to accomplish sustainability goals in lots of industries and lots of domains. So is reusable art transport systems using very long-lived components and materials that can be easily serviced a good opportunity for us? And the problem is, of course, that new materials and structures literally count for nothing if they don't improve the degree of care to protect the artwork in transit. So we can use lots of new materials, but if they don't perform, then we may be accomplishing sustainability the wrong thing. So here we go. So the first thing is I want to say is that a problem like this one is simply a condition in search of a better imagination. And maybe that's my one gift, is that I can daydream forever. And so and everybody's sort of seen probably enterprise workflows like I'm going to describe here. Another problem with problems is that they're often poorly defined. So I started the O'Keeffe Museum's journey for more effective protection of works of art by thinking that lighter crates would be an intelligent pathway towards better protection and greater sustainability. So I started designing and testing inflatable air bladder restraint systems. I don't think I've ever admitted this before in public. And that in the end all vibrated many times worse than the foam cushions I was trying to improve upon, right? So getting the right idea is pretty important. And then for a for-profit solution, is the problem broadly shared? Solving a unique packing problem is fascinating, but the one thing I knew was that all heritage materials in transit break if they are not properly isolated from impacts, and all heritage materials vibrate in response to trucks and airplanes. Address those problems and you address all heritage objects. Then can you imagine a resilient pathway that can lead to a new solution? Now the first attempts only helped illuminate where all my assumptions were wrong. So you're going to have to iterate over and over. Those new insights will trigger different directions than the one I first imagined. So how adaptable and resilient are your workflows and your processes? And what kind of resources are going to be required? Cash, time, facilities, these will all need to support the success of a team of people. And these are critical. The team is important and the resources are important because the process is one of iteration. You never get it right on the first time. You don't get it right on the second or third time. You're going to have to prototype after prototype, failure and improvement. And that occurs over and over. That takes time, facilities, and money. And so if you start down that road without having some guarantee of a way to sustain that over time, you're going to get stuck in ideation and you're never going to get to the finish line. So, yeah. So how do you know you've identified the right problem? Well, here's where I started out. For decades, everyone in conservation, including me, assumed that the biggest problem and the biggest threat to art in transit was shock, from collisions, from drops, from impacts. and using transmitted infrared imaging, which is what the image is on your right there. That's O'Keeffe's White Bird of Paradise painting, and then a detail with infrared light transmitting through the painting. And if you look carefully, there are some very thin white lines here, 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 right? So that's infrared light coming through an open crack. Barely visible to the human eye, but infrared penetrates that area easier because they're open. And so this is how I was beginning to determine that there were cracks occurring in transit. And in fact, when we added up the mileage of O'Keeffe's paintings, both we knew that she had traveled and that we had traveled, we were finding that new cracks were propagating about every 20,000 miles, even though we knew there were no impacts. So again, it began to reinforce the idea that vibration might be the problem. And with further analysis, I became more and more convinced of that fact. The major point is the title of this slide. Every painting and every object has a vibration lifetime. There is only so many cycles at its natural frequency that any object can vibrate before there's a failure. Now, we don't know how much of that original lifetime remains in any given object, but we do know that if we can reduce the displacement amplitude, that is how far the object vibrates when it's energized, we can extend the travel life of every object. The question is how much? Well, so our research suggests that in paintings, reducing vibration displacement response, so that's total movement back and forth, that's the amplitude, and the number of cycles. Reducing that by 10%, it's exponential. It will increase the number of cycles before failure by 62%, right? And put another way, if you reduce displacement by half, by 50%, you increase the available travel life of a painting 16 times. So regardless of how much is left, you can increase that life through travel. So the next point that I had to find out was, how do our objects vibrate? So you're seeing an actual painting vibrate here, right? This is a painting in an easel, and all these little dots on that are points that we're measuring using laser Doppler vibrometry. So the array with all the lights on it there are a series of 16 laser vibrometers. So they emit a infrared laser to a surface. That light scatters, and what we're measuring is the speed of light coming back to the instrument. And the speed of light in the Doppler effect, as something vibrates away from the instrument, the frequency of the light gets lower, and as it comes closer to the instrument, the frequency of light gets higher. So we're measuring that frequency, and so we can measure how fast the object is vibrating, what the acceleration is, and what the displacement is. So here we're simply, I'm just tapping the easel here, and here we're watching it vibrate back and forth. And you can sort of see that at first it begins to rock back and forth, and then pretty soon the canvas itself, and only the canvas, is moving back and forth. That's the note of that object vibrating, okay? So it's just like a bell or like a guitar string. It doesn't matter whether you pluck it hard or pluck it soft. It's only going to vibrate at its particular note. So we started looking at paintings, line paintings, small paintings, big paintings, and to try and determine what the range was. So this is laser Doppler vibrometry, same technique. The trend graph is now different. Instead of recording time, I'm recording the frequency, the note, if you will, of the systems I'm looking at. So this is 20 cycles per second, or hertz, 40 cycles per second. And we're measuring, in this particular illustration, 23.5 hertz, 23.5 cycles per second. And I'm picking that out because what we found out is sort of, so the outer green line is the crate, is our travel crate, okay? And the travel crate is holding a travel box, a T box, with pads at all four corners. And the corners are important because they are the most rigid point in that whole system. If you start looking at things in the middle and supporting things in the middle, it moves a whole lot. So we want to secure the object in transit at its most rigid points. The next box inside is the perimeter of the travel box, and then you're looking at the painting itself inside the travel box. Now we've secured all that to try and replicate the effect of having the lid on there, but of course you have to have the lid off in order to make the test. So what I'm doing is I'm energizing it from the back corner with a vibration pot. It's like a speaker with a pole on it, and it vibrates in controllable ways, both amplitude and frequency. So we know what the input is. And this is the whole spectrum. So from 1 hertz all the way up to 50 hertz. And the peak of that curve is how much displacement there is, how much something is moving. So what I want you to notice is that as it moves towards the vibrometer, towards us, the audience, it gets red, and when it moves away, it goes blue, green to blue. Notice that the outside of the crate is moving very little. The inside crate is actually moving more than the outside crate, right? And of course, the painting is moving the most. That's the double drum mode at 23.5. And the reason that was happening was that we built this crate around the painting to custom fit it. Unknowingly, we created a crate that had the same natural frequency, the same note as the painting. So we energize it at exactly the energy it's going to absorb and move the most, and then we put it inside an inside box, and the inside box is moving more than the outside box. So they are in phase. It's in phase amplification. That makes sense? So here's a graph. I'll just show it briefly. The lowest line, the blue line, is the outer crate. The red line is the inner crate. The brown line is the frame of the painting, and the green line is the canvas. So each one is amplifying more and more and more, and that's what foam cushions do, unfortunately, is they go into phase and they amplify. So the next question was, okay, how do our transport vehicles behave? That's what I want to know. If I know that all my paintings are going to shake between 10 and 60 hertz, regardless of whether they're small or large, lined or unlined, they all fall within that range of about 10 to 60 hertz. And I know my crates are amplifying that. Well, maybe trucks don't transmit that to start with, right? Nah, wrong. So we have 3 graphs here. The one on the left are vertical up and down accelerations in an air ride truck. The one on the right is in the direction of travel, front to back on the truck. And the bottom one is the all-important lateral side to side. And the red line is the ASTM military standard for a leaf spring truck. The blue line is actually the performance of an air ride art transport truck. And you can see immediately that, except for the lateral displacement, air ride trucks do a much better job of removing energy. So this is total energy, displacement, as well as time vibrating in that area. This is called a paraspectral distribution curve, right? So, but the main thing I want to point out is that these bracketed blue lines, the space between those bracketed blue lines, is my damage frequency. That's where paintings vibrate, right? That's that 10 to 50 hertz, 10 to 60 hertz region. And notice that the peaks are high, the energy is highest there. In the vertical, this is down here at about, this is 1, 2, 3, this is a logarithmic scale, 4 hertz, so that's about an earthquake. So the trucks do have this kind of lumbering 4 hertz movement, but that doesn't create any stress gradients in a painting. The next energy area is right in my damage region, right? We can see there's hardly any vibration front to back in a truck, and that's because they don't accelerate or brake very quickly. But in the lateral, notice that in an air ride truck, the lateral movement actually exceeds the ASTM standard of a leaf spring truck. And that's because trucks are moving faster than ever before, and wind resistance is causing an enormous amount of side-to-side displacement. So the trucks are energizing in exactly the wrong place. Here's an airplane, similar kind of graph. That's a heat map of vibration within a passenger aircraft. If you sit next to the exits, the window exits like I do, you get most of the vibration. But this is the paraspectral distribution curve. And so that's 100 hertz right there. Here's our damage region for paintings. And notice that the energy is still pretty high, but really things jump way up from about 100 hertz to about 600 hertz in an aircraft. And that's the vibration damage region for ceramics, for glass, for stone sculpture. So in fact, isolating stone sculpture, ceramics, or glass in an aircraft is really a critical problem. Less of a problem for paintings, but much more for those materials. Okay, so here's my first answer to try and keep paintings from moving. And this is a patent illustration from a patent I got issued. And I won't explain the whole technology here, but basically this is a frame, this is the stretcher, the blue line is the canvas, right? And what I've done is I've created, as I was telling Mikkel at lunchtime, I've created just a small air volume behind the painting. And I've contained that air volume with a gasket, and by creating that small air volume, I've created an air piston. So for the canvas to sag in the middle, it has to push air out of that space. And if it's sealed, it can't do it. So that air piston literally keeps the canvas from displacing. So I'll show you the net effect of that. Another graph, sorry about that. But if you look at the yellow line up there, that's me tapping a canvas with no backing and no glazing on the front. So no air piston whatsoever. And you can see I tap it, and then it moves way up, and then slowly it rings back down. The red line is when I add a gasketed backing. So the total energy there, the total displacement of the canvas, is reduced about 60%. And if I add another air piston on the front with glazing, gasketed glazing, it comes down to the blue line. So the displacement is left lower, and the number of cycles to the resting position is much faster. So just by changing the framing, I've done exactly that. Here's where we start out. Excuse me. Here's where we start out in terms of displacement. Here, the purple line that gets much smaller is the effect of a backing, and the red line is the effect of glazing and backing. So that's pretty cool. So this is a dynamic data presentation of an actual shipping crate. And what we're doing here is that the biggest rectangle, the blue rectangle, is the crate itself, the outer crate. The magenta colored line is a travel box with a framed artwork inside. And then the black rectangle is the front of the crate, right? And of course, the motion is slowed way down. So we're talking about a region here of 18 to 25 hertz, 18 to 25 cycles every second. That happens to be the natural frequency of that crate. And the net effect is that you can see you've got this sort of pumping motion back and forth. But if you look carefully, the crate is also twisting. It's racking back and forth. And the painting is racking in exactly out of phase, right? So we're creating a whole bunch of stress gradients. And this is what we're trying to avoid in any design, is keeping crates from vibrating at the resonant frequency of the art we're trying to protect. So my approach was this. Paintings vibrate the most of almost any material. That is to say, they have the lowest natural resonant frequencies, right? The lowest note, because they are the softest. So canvas paint, if you start at canvas paintings, every other piece of heritage material vibrates at higher frequencies than that. So if you can isolate the lowest, you can use the same exact technology and protect everything else that has a higher frequency than that. So that's where we started. So protect your ideas and your IP. When something begins to work, write a patent. So these are literally the patents for these technologies. And it's not that we want to own and keep people from using the IP. That's not it exactly. You get a patent so you can share the IP, but ensure some quality control so that people use it properly, right? People don't try to cut corners. And so this is what things begin to look like when you begin to rethink it. So what if we had, so we say right off the bat, all art vibrates at natural frequencies of 8 hertz or higher, right? So if you could secure art to an inner box that only vibrates below 8 hertz, then you've protected the art from vibration impulses. So it would be great if you could secure multiple works of art inside that box, so it wasn't just carrying one. What if you could carry 4? What if you could carry 5 works within the same transport box and isolate all of those and increase sort of the number of works you're protecting with the same energy output? And what if the inner box that holds the art was suspended with a multi-stage isolator that cuts out vibrations, below 7 hertz, but also absorbs impacts and collisions, keeping the total force below 25 Gs, which is kind of the damage threshold. So we're talking about an isolator that has sort of 2 spring functions inside of it. And what if you could do all that in a weatherproof insulated container that's assembled using fully recyclable materials that are serviceable, that don't give out after a year, but actually have a much longer life, that are sort of industrial materials that you could replace as they begin to fatigue. So that's kind of where we've been for the last 11 years. This is just one prototype. It has changed a great deal. The current prototype is 60 inches high, so it will go into commercial over-ocean aircraft, about 85 inches, 86 inches long, and about 35 inches wide. Let's talk about some of the challenges to this seemingly wonderful story. Oh yeah, so this is the laser Doppler vibrometry of that iteration. So you can see, if you look at the lower right-hand corner, you can see how much I'm shaking the outer box. I am really pushing that outer box to see how it behaves. And you can see to the inner suspension, as well as the painting itself, is vibrating much, much less at its natural frequency of about 5 hertz. So that's what we're looking for, and so this is the graph that shows exactly what we want. When you attenuate vibration, you want a very low natural frequency. That, in other words, you want that thing to ring at a very low note, just that one low note, and then you want to attenuate everything higher than that. So this is 10 hertz, this is 40 hertz, and we have continuous attenuation. So what are the challenges? Well, the answer is not lighter crates. That's the first thing I learned, is that lighter crates vibrate more easily. They get pushed around much, much more easily with greater displacement and greater tip-over tendencies than heavy crates. So going light, even though it might save CO2, is not necessarily the answer. Vibration is a function of mass and stiffness of the material, right? And when you add mass, you lower the frequency, so mass is very important. The question is, pound for pound, how many pieces of art can you transport with that weight? That's where you get your efficiency. Clearly, the answer does lie with reusable crates that hold multiple works securely, that are made up of serviceable parts. But reusable crates get their efficiency from being rapidly returned to service. Returning, storing, and distributing reusable crates takes a dedicated infrastructure, and there's the rub. That infrastructure doesn't exist, and it's going to be expensive. And museums don't typically have the manufacturing experience or capacity. When I try and order and manufacture parts with my engineers, because we're only ordering 4 or 8 of everything, we're at the bottom of the list. There are other industries that are ordering thousands of them, and they get to us when they can. And that's a real problem that small production companies like ours just can't compete with. So it takes us a long time. That's what I've got. Thanks.
Thank you, Dale. All right, up next is Steve. Everyone, this is Steve Pardun. Steve is currently serving as Vice President of Sales at Atelier 4, a distinguished fine art shipping and logistics company. With over 14 years of experience in the industry, Steve has honed his expertise in managing complex logistic operations with precision and efficiency. Steve's journey into the realm of logistics began after earning his bachelor's degree in theater, film, and television from the University of Colorado. His passion for problem solving and attention to detail led him to pursue a career in shipping and logistics, where he discovered his knack for orchestrating seamless transportation solutions.
Thank you so much.
Turn it over to you.
Thank you. That's okay. Thank you. All right. Afternoon, everybody. So, just a quick question. We are all staying at the 21C Hotel, right? Pretty much. Okay. So, if you were on the 4th floor and you were woken up at 5 a.m. by a man screaming and then laughing, on the fourth floor. I apologize, that was me. I went out my door, and someone had gone around and taken all of the green penguins and staged them in front of the hotel room across from mine. So when I walked out, it looked like a SWAT raid going in there. I have great pictures of it on my phone. I'm happy to show you. Is that, I don't know if the hotel does it, or if it was, they do. Okay, I was thinking it was like a frat prank or something, which I was really excited. But either way, it's hilarious. So, hello everyone. It's an honor to be here at Crystal Bridges. My name is Steve Pardun. I am the Vice President of Sales and Business Development at Atelier 4. We're a fine art logistics company based in New York, Miami, Los Angeles, and Charlotte, North Carolina. So Crystal Bridges had reached out to my colleague Jamie Harker because they heard about her work on a couple of initiatives relative to today's conference. The first one is the ISOFAT climate calculator. Should I do that? There we go. Okay. So ISOFAT stands for the International Convention of Exhibition and Fine Art Transporters. It's an awkward-sounding acronym, I know. ISOFAT is a trade association comprised of 79 fine arts logistics companies representing 37 different countries. We meet every year in person to discuss industry topics and professional development opportunities. Now, during the year, the steering committee and various subcommittees made up of member volunteers serve the association to prepare the convention program and collaborate on many initiatives in service of the association. One of those subcommittees is ESG, or Environmental, Social, and Governance, formerly known as the Green Committee. Their task was to develop a carbon calculator to enable our clients to see what the footprints of their shipments are. Atelier 4's Jamie Harker is the chairperson of ISOFAT's ESG subcommittee. Along with 5 other volunteers from various countries around the world, they work to develop the calculator as a value add for member proposals to our clients so they are informed of the environmental impact of not only shipments by road, air, or ocean, but also the cost to our ecology when fabricating travel crates for the objects we handle. Not only is our industry increasingly aware and concerned with the threat to our ecosystem, but pressures are also coming from governments around the world. In fact, there are many watch groups and think tanks that are pooling data to raise awareness and to call for action. One of them commissioned a carbon calculator for determining the carbon footprint of the shipping modalities, and that's something used by our company and many others. Thanks to the Gallery Climate Coalition, ISOFAT was instead able to focus their attention on the consumables and energy used in the fabrication of the crates, adding value to the existing model. And there she is. I'm on the ISOFAT marketing committee, so every day we're like, is it done? Is it done? Can we talk about it? Can we please? Come on. So ISOFAT had contracted Dr. Matthew Eckelman to create a carbon calculator for creating artworks. Dr. Eckelman also worked on sustainability tools and cultural heritage. Crozier, another ISOFAT member, volunteered their creating technology coordinator, Christopher Barber, who made invaluable contributions. ISOFAT agents are now able to offer clients the environmental cost of the various scenarios. Can everybody kind of see where it is at the bottom? Okay. But what if you want to avoid adding to your carbon expenditures? There have been and continue to be crate rental programs. Traditionally, these are well-crafted exhibition cases augmented with additional features such as steel angle brackets and corners similar to road cases used in the electronics and the performance world. Trying to provide lighter weight and durable solutions, Van Kralingen of Holland introduced the Turtle 20 years ago, inspired by the high-tech surfboard material that Hiskia used to hang 10 on. Atelier 4's CEO, Jonathan Schwartz, researched the possibility of a repurpose program in 2009. The insurmountable obstacle was the unbillable warehousing of idle inventory. Schwartz envisioned a nonprofit that would require the support of unused government properties such as United States Post Office facilities. The seed of this initiative was planted at the ERC 2010 conference in Amsterdam, presented along with 2 other ISOFAT agents, Tandem of Germany and the former San Francisco-based Ship Art International. Although the conference's theme was being green, Schwartz was very clear that there was very little about logistics that was any shade of green whatsoever. Nope. Back. Yep. So So the IOMC stalled for nearly a decade when it was given another shot at the 2019 ARCS conference in Philadelphia. The initiative was considered as part of a pitch by Sustainable Museums, and then the pandemic hit. In 2022, Jamie Harker, keeper of A4's Sustainable Moral Compass, convinced management that it was time for a pilot program, and it was agreed that A4 would underwrite the idle inventory. So welcome to the island of misfit crates. Fun animation. Okay. So we went live after the 2023 presentation at the November PACN virtual conference on sustainable developments and crating. Because of limited available space in our New York, Miami, and LA warehouses, the program is currently offering pre-existing A4 built travel crates that have returned from exhibition. Nope. Oh, I just click it. I get it. Okay. So our new warehouse in Charlotte, however, has space to expand the program. Unfortunately, transporting reusable crates empty negates the carbon savings, so we plan to put the crates on part-load shuttles already committed to the route. When we were able to expand in New York and Los Angeles, we look forward to accepting viable crate candidates from others and offer them to the commercial and institutional communities who want to support the initiative. As of today, we've been informed that the LA inventory is 100% depleted of what we call orphans, having been adopted by some of our more enlightened clients. And that's all I got.
Thank you, Steve.
100% adopted.
All right, next up we have Casey Serota. As Casey makes his way up here. Casey is the Special Projects Manager for Masterpiece International, a fine arts logistics company headquartered in New York City. He started at Masterpiece in 2004 as an exhibition assistant and has worked in several roles within the company from international exhibition manager to branch manager of various offices. Currently, he works in the New York office on large-scale exhibitions and with countrywide programs, including the creation of a team within the Fine Arts Department, reviewing industrial sustainability programming. He is working with Masterpiece's parent company in developing a team to review the sustainability efforts across all segments of their logistics business. Casey?
Great, thank you all. I'm so glad to be here and to meet everyone from Art Bridges. This has been a great opportunity and great to hear from lots of our colleagues about what's going on. I'm going to talk about 4 major points that Masterpiece is working on in terms of sort of offering sustainable solutions and programming that we're developing to help clients through the museum world, the gallery world, and the private client spectrum. So the first of these points is the Turtle Crate. Masterpiece is the North American distributor for the Turtle Crate, and we've had that since 2019. It was a terrible time to try to roll out a sustainable crate, but we reinvigorated the program in 2022, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. We're also working with clients to develop courier alternatives. This came about as technological solutions were needed in 2020 to monitor shipments in a more sustainable way, but also where people couldn't actually be present. So we have a couple technologies that we've worked on that, and they've also added to sustainability programming. And a number of museums, and our museums here, are using those technologies now in place of couriers. The third point is that as a fine arts company based within a general logistics parent company, we have access to a lot of other modes of transportation that are a little more sustainable than air freight. It gives us a lot of options and a lot of routing that we can offer, whether or not the timing and the risk are acceptable for their use is a question that comes up. And finally, our management has prioritized annual greenhouse gas emissions report, and I'll get into some of those details further. So this, for those who don't know, this is the Turtle Crate. This is the main model that we have. This is the Turtle 160. It came out about 6 years ago, just before we brought them to the United States. The original model of Turtle, as Steve mentioned, was developed by Hiskieve van Kralingen in the Netherlands. It was a fiberglass-based crate, and that was indeed developed based on surfboard technology originally. The current model, this model, is a composite material. It's a more rigid material, and a lot of the technology that went into developing this model came from studying the original crates. Those original crates that were developed for a Mondrian exhibition that traveled from the Hagskarmenta Museum to Japan and the United States, those crates are still on the road today. They've been on the road for 25 years, and they're still used. There's some amount of material that is replaced, bumpers, inner linings, and that sort of thing. But in general, those crates are still in use. The company that helps manufacture the exterior composite material can actually chip that down and create it and use them for concrete if it's determined that the crate has reached its end of its life, if something sort of horrible were to happen to it. But we don't expect that to happen. We expect them to stay on the road for a long time. So if you haven't seen the inside of one, this is just to illustrate what that looks like. This is a Mondrian, obviously, being placed into the four corner blocks. The dimensions of the Turtle 160 are 160 centimeters by 160 centimeters. It's, again, meant to be exactly to fit onto a commercial passenger aircraft. The crate can accept multiple artworks inside, whether stacked, staggered, or in stacks if that was an acceptable way of handling them. You can see the original yellow crate in the background if you're sort of curious about what that looks like. There are three main versions of the corner blocks. The one on the left is the standard adjustable corner block with a slider that adjusts for the depth of the artwork, and then it's positioned within the crate for the height and the length of the work. The straight block in the middle is used for packing round or intricate framed works. And then the non-adjustable corner block is used for T-frames and inner boxes. This is the newest technology that's come from the Turtle development team. It's called the T+ adjustable corner blocks. They have this wire suspension, which further isolates and reduces vibration on artwork. And so it's just an added element to the Turtle system that can be added to the packing. These were developed after some other innovations that came out of the Turtle developers, including a thing called the climate case, which is used to pack many flatworks into one box for transit. There's also a larger version of the Turtle that we hope to have access to in the next year or so. So moving on to some of our other technology solutions, Tive and Artwise are the two technologies that we've worked with for managing courier systems in a more sustainable way. This is a page from our Artwise database. It's a client-facing database that we've developed that allows us to input straight from our internal database to making a link to provide clients, shippers, borrowers, so that they can see all of the data that we're working with for a specific shipment. We add key milestones into that. So for instance, if your truck is being loaded at the museum, as soon as that has actually happened, our staff adds that to the system. It immediately sends out notifications to everyone on the list that is is set up to receive those, when it gets to the airport, when it's palletized, when all of those things happen, it gets those key milestones, send out an alert so that everyone can see. Similar to what you would have with a courier, but without having one necessarily present. And the Tive tracker is the other technology that we've been using. These have been used both inside crates to get the most accurate data for the artwork, and for people who are less concerned with the humidity and temperature monitoring and more with location and time-sensitive movements. They can be attached to the outside of crates as well. They do measure location, temperature, humidity, shock, and light exposure. They are a single-use technology, but they are also recyclable. What we do is, after they've been used from a shipment, we gather them in our offices, and we send them back to the manufacturer for reprogramming. They don't get used a second time because they need to, the sensitive data that they've recorded and their battery life has to be maintained to make sure that they're still usable for the next shipment. So we also have multimodal shipping options for consideration. Obviously, I mean, that's a batch of turtles traveling together on an airplane. That's a pretty standard way of international shipping. But the Gallery Climate Coalition and others have asked for ocean-going options and offering some standard routes, such as East Coast of the United States to Europe, or West Coast to Asia. We do have access to all of those options and can provide them. It really, again, depends on what people's timelines are and what their ability to accept the risk of ocean freight is. We're also talking about reefer containers and various other things that can add a level of protection to using ocean freight as an option. We also, as a company that doesn't really own our own trucks, we work with vendors, and we are talking to them about fleet modernization. And we've developed a significant network of consolidated road transportations within the United States. That has to do, and I think, Dale, you'd mentioned about how you distribute a reusable crate over a large network. Where the turtle was developed in the Netherlands, it's a very small country. You can get from one end to the other in a couple hours. It's very easy to distribute the turtle in the Netherlands. In the United States, it's a very different element. So we have 14 offices across the United States. We work with fine art vendors around the country, and we've developed the network to be able to use consolidated transport for moving both empty turtles and packed turtles in that network. In terms of fleet modernization, we also work with our partners in Europe and other countries where their fleet modernization has had to do with legislation more significantly than in the United States, where Euro 6 emissions are required, for instance, to go into the City of London. Other cities have similar requirements on the trucks that go into actual locations. We don't so much have that in the United States, and we're talking with partners on how that will develop. We're also, doing a calculation for carbon consumption and emissions. We print this on all invoices that we issue. One of the things that this allows us to do through our database is to print that data and do an audit for every museum client that we have to show every shipment that they are handling what that consumption is, and to get a yearly number of what the total consumption they're handling as part of their shipping budget. We can isolate that as to what is a loan that is going out for someone else, so it goes into someone else's calculation versus your own exhibition programming. And our company is using several tools to develop tracking data for greenhouse gas equivalents and carbon consumption. As we're part of a larger logistics company. So this is part of the, so my parent company is called Magnate. That's going to change in a couple weeks, but it is for now called Magnate. They've done this audit for us and talking about the scope 1, 2, and 3 consumption. When I first heard that, I wasn't exactly sure what that meant, but it's been fascinating to sort of follow that along. The first is direct emissions from the company's owned or controlled fleet, vehicles and our own facilities. The second is indirect purchased energy. And the third, which is the bulk of our logistics company emissions, comes from indirect emissions. So stuff that we're not creating necessarily, but that we're purchasing on our client's behalf. And this is where, where you really see that. Purchased logistics services are the vast majority of that consumption. Overall for the company, and then a much smaller amount for the for our company-owned fleet, for our own staff working. It's helpful to have these numbers to as a baseline to try to work towards improving as a logistics company. And to that end, we are also working with the Gallery Climate Coalition as a member, and talking with them about how to improve practices and reduce emissions. And we're working with the Smart Freight Center, which is a group of large logistics companies, which are working towards a goal of zero emissions in freight and logistics. It's a very lofty goal at this point, but it's something that our ownership really believes in, and something that we're excited to participate in. And that is, what is this?
Can you go back 2 slides?
Sure.
I just really like the way you've broken that out, including, looks like commuting of your own staff.
Oh, I just got off of it. Yes, exactly. They're really interested in looking at holistically at how the company operates beyond just the purchase logistics. That's an obvious element, but it's everything that goes into the calculation.
That's great.
Cool.
All right. If we could have Dale and Casey and Steve come on up, and we'll have some time for questions.
Hello.
All right.
I think it really depends on which company for us. I mean, we're probably 65-70% museum shipments, and we're probably 30% galleries and private clients. I think both of our competitor Deedle is more like 30% museum, and so it's really depending on.
We're probably about 40% museum. I would say 60% commercial. We stopped. I mean, the pandemic kind of forced us to do it, but people can hear me, right? Yes. Okay. The pandemic sort of forced us to reevaluate our business model, but the one thing that we really got out of was the art fairs. But traditionally, A4 was, back in the day, 70% of Art Basel Miami Beach, which is massive, and I did 2 of them. I've been with the company about 5 years. And after the pandemic, we really wanted to look at our model and say, one, do we want to put people in harm's way? Because the first one that came after the pandemic, everybody got sick. And 2, do we want to try to staff up for this? Or would we rather focus on commercial gallery and the institutional world? And we decided to go that way.
Hi, Melissa Durkee, head registrar at the Art Bridges. Okay, cool. To hold it. So I have so many questions. I will start with Dale. Are there any data in regards to vibrations from sea freight shipments? I mean, I would think and assume, maybe wrongfully, that they would be less vibrations on sea freight shipments?
No, ocean transport.
Yep.
Yeah, so I haven't seen any data on, I mean, obviously, we know that there's that very slow sort of thing, but there are inherent vibrations in any powertrain, right?
Sure.
So from diesel engine to drivetrain to propeller to wave motion, those all create resonances within the ship, which transmit resonances then to the containers, right? So there can be, the one thing we've learned is that the more isolators you have, probably the more amplification is going to occur. So when you have that many sort of separated sleeves around the thing you're transporting, it all gets down to transmission and what vibration frequencies are ultimately transmitted to your container, right? So it really would take hard data to really know that that's better from an object protection standpoint.
Sure, sure. Thank
It
you.
is a long time within a, so, I mean, right now, I don't know about you all, but when we build a crate, you know, we're using PU foams, we're using Volara, we're using Ethafoam. They're lined with Marble Seal, but PU does, you know, off-gas over a period of time. They're not made for long-term storage or long-term transport. You know, our transport legs at the most are 72 hours, and then they're out of that crate. So ocean transport would be longer than 72 hours. So then you really have to think about your materials.
Thank you. And Casey, I'm going to put you on the spot. This is a very basic question. What is more environmentally friendly, a shuttle transport or a next use transport?
Oh, a shuttle transport.
Really? Because in my brain, I'm going, well, it's making more stops, right? So they're emitting more
Right.
CO2.
I think you're filling up a truck with more stuff. You're utilizing the space more, and
Right.
you're offering a routing that accommodates a lot of different things that takes a lot of vehicles off the road. If everything, I mean, it's not in that one vehicle making its multiple stops. It's that you're
Sure.
saving 15 trips rather than one.
The other thing I'll tell you is that a loaded truck vibrates 10 times less
Right.
than a lightly
Okay.
loaded truck because you don't have that pre-compression
Sure.
capacity. And so that's another advantage to a shuttle is that it tends to be loaded more heavily. Not only do you get the efficiencies, but it is a far smoother ride.
Great. Thank you both.
Hi. Hi. I'm Andrea Alvarez, Associate Curator at the Buffalo AKG. Thank you all so much. I also have so many questions, but I'm going to limit myself to two. The first is just these sort of new approaches to the crates that you've presented, both of you, are so interesting and compelling, but I can't help but go to the practical question of the cost of what, you know, that is compared to the crates that we're traditionally building. And when we're looking at building bespoke crates for loaned exhibitions or, you know, for in cases where we're a very actively acquiring institution, so we have a lot of crates that we're building in sort of as needed. So the question of sort of the cost is a real big one for me. So I'll stop there first.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the turtle crate is a rental-only option right now, which means that it sort of depends on your length of time that you need to use it. If you are using it for a single venue exhibition, it's going to be significantly cheaper to use a turtle than it will be to build a bespoke crate. However, and this is where we've run into some troubles with art bridges and similar organizations where you want to have it for many venues for a longer period of time, then it doesn't necessarily make the same amount of sense. And that has to do more with, again, we're on the for-profit panel. We have to make it work. We have to make it a viable option as economically for the company as well. But we try to make it work for everyone, and there are a couple of different ways that we've done it. There are a number of institutions that have done long-term rentals of the turtle crates for many years, and they get a better rate, and then they can charge individual venues for the use of the crates themselves. We've done discounted models where it's been possible because there's multiple turtles going. So there are ways in which we are working to try to make
I guess for those of us on the island, it's brand new. We don't quite know what to charge for, because technically, if it's one of ours, somebody already paid for it once. Do we do half the cost of what it did with a free shuttle to get it somewhere? We're not sure. We want to see the program succeed. So it's very much like what makes sense for us. Now, if we end up with significant inventory in all 4 of our locations, we'd like to see some revenue to offset the fact that it's taking up billable space that I could sell to somebody else. So
Yeah,
it's kind of the Wild West.
Storing crates, right, means that you've got real estate, you've got building maintenance, you've got utilities, sort of all wrapped up into that storage equation, and so that's part of the cost of a reusable crate. But I think taking things to the landfill, as we do currently with our wood crates, right? Once they've reached sort of the end, even refitting, tearing out the old cushions and refitting costs more than building the new crate. I mean, our crate builders cannot do it for the same money, right? So the actual cost of a bespoke crate is being pushed onto the taxpayers who are paying for the landfill, right? And the pollution load in that landfill is completely unmeasured, right? So if we're really going to be responsible in looking at a sort of industrial material reusable crate that has a very long life, the equation changes completely if we include those sort of hidden, undocumented taxpayer costs, and let alone the impact long-term on the environment. So I love the idea of thinking in decades rather than in years. You know, as a conservator, when my board asks me, so, you know, God, you're going through all these lengths to preserve our collection, you know, what is your goal? What do you want to get them? How long do you want their lifetime to be? And I say 300 years, right? First of all, that gets me off the hook. I won't be alive. But that truly is the lifetime that I'm looking at, trying to get those things along, knowing full well that in 50 years there'll be more technology and somebody like me will be able to push that envelope even further. So when we think about that kind of timeline and the overall environmental load versus the initial cost, I haven't done that calculation, but I can't help but think that reusable crates that last decades with serviceable parts, even with the real estate and building maintenance and utilities calculation, will be far better. I'll just put it, you know, I won't say money-wise, I'll just say it's far better.
Thank you. I'm going to cut myself off. So.
Hi, this kind of actually dovetails into what you were just talking about, but I was just wondering from all of you if you're even calculating or considering even like the material source emissions and what that looks like. And I know, Steve, you mentioned the STITCH, the Sustainability Tools and Cultural Heritage Calculator, which I definitely suggest everyone check out. But where is what's the state of affairs in looking at that and even including that in the overall calculations, knowing that technology is changing every day and there are some tested things that aren't great, but just thinking also that for long term, maybe where we could be going.
Yeah, I think it'll get there at some point. Well, Jamie worked on this and developed it a lot more than I did. I know that this is version 1.0. They are working on version 2.0, so I think they'll start to address some of those things. I know, like there was a comment earlier that the GCC calculator wasn't as good for museums as it was for like commercial style shipments. So that might be wrapped up in there as well. I'm not privy to that, but yeah, I think it's something that they're definitely looking at.
For me, the equation first is that the technology has to work, right? And I, you know, from my own iterations, I know that there are lots of things that look really good and that are very sustainable over the long run that simply do not attenuate either shock or vibration. So there's no use having really, really good materials if, in fact, it's worse protection for the artwork. So the artwork becomes the least sustainable thing. So I hope that, and I've encouraged Stitch to try and evaluate the effectiveness, right, of isolating objects for both shock, thermal changes, as well as vibration, and to then calculate the utility over the cost, divide that by the environmental cost, the CO2 cost, the waste cost. That'd be the way to do it.
I would say just the turtle crate is considered, I mean, they've received recently a climate neutral rating, but it does take energy and materials to create the thing. We did something of a calculation a few years ago. It's more than what you would use for a standard wooden crate in its initial construction, but a standard wooden crate has a much shorter lifespan. This is, as I mentioned in the presentation, it's 25 years of the original crates. That's pretty significant.
Really good.
So over time, it reduces so much wood consumption, so much other material consumption that it's better in the long run. But that's a slightly harder thing to calculate.
I've got a question for the audience, just briefly. Speaking about cost, like we just built a crate for a 7-foot painting that is 86 inches long and probably 65 high. And that crate, marble steel lining, gasketed, using the cushioning curve calculations, getting the pads right. That crate cost us about $5,000. And I'm just curious what other people are paying for a sort of type A bolted, gasketed, marble steel lined, insulated crate. $5,000 is not a drop in the bucket for something that you're going to use a year.
I feel like we've paid more.
Interesting.
I think you got a good deal.
Hi, Rachel from MoMA. I guess this question is probably more for KC, and this question around sea freight, it's something that we're definitely exploring. You probably are familiar with that, conversations with our registrars on an upcoming exhibition. So just curious if you're seeing more museums actually choosing this as an option. We've heard arguments that maybe it's not that much more sustainable than air freight for certain shipments, depending on where they're coming from and if they have to get trucked to ports. And there are other environmental impacts of sea freight that maybe are not a carbon calculator apples to apples sort of comparison. Obviously, there are risks that you mentioned that we're all assessing in terms of the materiality of the work, the duration, issues with sort of ports and options around that we don't have, that we expect with air freight. So just curious, like within the field, if that's something that people are moving towards. It's definitely something we want to explore more. Just curious about that.
Yeah, we're seeing more requests for options. We're not seeing a huge amount of museum utilization quite yet. I would say that the shipments that successfully have worked with ocean freight have been big sculptures, things that are very have a lower impact on their materials in terms of humidity, temperature exposure, and can withstand those longer time frames. I think the considerations in terms of the other issues around sea freight are also worth considering. The fuel is not as refined as airline fuel, so it's a much dirtier energy to be using. But because of the consolidation of so much stuff on one ship, you still are reducing the actual impact so much more significantly. I think that the GCC says something like using same weight air freight versus sea freight is with 1/60th of the consumption for ocean freight versus air freight. So it's a drastic drop in the consumption. The other issues around it are significant.
Yeah, I think, and also there's other factors to it as well. It's like obviously in the museum world, everyone's fantastic at planning, and you know what you're doing next year and maybe the year after. But like I do more on the commercial side. I'll get people. I want to save some money. Can I ship it by ocean? I'll look at something and say, you don't have the time, and I don't want to take on the liability because it just won't get there on time. We have a lot less control at the ports, whereas the airport, we are. You have control at the airport. I have control at the airport. But at the ports, like it's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, we can hire we can hire things like a surveyor who can be there But then you end up paying someone to stay there for 24 hours, but you never know exactly when the ship is going to be offloaded and that sort of thing. And that's a level of risk that you're taking on by doing that shipping. But it's not to say that's not happening. It's just it's on a much smaller scale.
Well, I think as we gather the data, because I feel like our registrars and conservators are very hesitant to take on something new without having information that they can base it on as being safe and all of those things. And so it is a slow turning ship.
Yes.
On board, but
And also, I'd be curious just from the from the insurance perspective, like are insurers willing to insure our work that's going to go on an ocean vessel where there are a lot more perils than airlines? Okay.
we might need underwriter approval of, but yeah.
Nice.
Obviously, I've talked to industry, particularly pharmaceutical industry, who use a lot of the materials that I use, whether they're shipping by ocean. And their response is that, if you've ever had a box sit out on the Dallas tarmac or Chicago tarmac in summer or winter, the absorbed BTUs of heat or the loss of BTUs of heat is extreme. And you want something exposed to those environmental conditions as short as possible. So exactly the point that if it's not something that's temperature or humidity sensitive, then that's a reasonable thing. But if you are unwilling to have something hit 120 degrees and stay there all day for multiple days before it gets on board ship, maybe not a good option, because the other industries that have perishable goods don't use it.
Hey, thank you all. This is a subject that's near and dear to my heart. Someone who started out as a crate builder before I became an art handler. I wanted to follow up. I know for sea freight, Hauser and Wirth has been doing some shipments. They've done a couple over the last few years, and Vincent Beltran at the Getty Conservation Institute is going to be partnering with them, I think, to collect some vibration and shock data from a sea shipment. So hopefully we'll start seeing some hard data on that soon. Dale, I've seen you talk about this project 3 times now, and each time I understand a little bit more about what you're saying. But I always have a question. I'm sure there's a really simple answer to it, but your video models show the crate open.
Yep.
I assume that's just for illustrative purposes.
Well, it's to actually take the measurement, because you got to get the laser on there. But so what we did is we affixed each component to the one behind it, as if the lid was on.
So you don't think the lid missing from the front contributes to the flexibility of the crate?
So the one thing we did test was with accelerometers to see if that made a difference. And in fact, the lid served as a soundboard. So low frequency vibrations actually went up with the lid on. So it's like having 2 drum heads instead of 1. That make sense?
No, but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah.
And then I also want to just say, at LACMA, Laura and I are working on a project that hopefully gets funded. We've done a little pilot study with sustainable alternatives to packing materials. Dale has been sharing his knowledge, as well as other colleagues all across the industry, Jonathan Schwartz from A4. But we're hoping to expand a pilot program we did on cushioning materials to include crate shell materials that are more sustainable, insulation materials, stuff like that. So if anyone's interested, hit us up and we'll add you to our email list.
All right, I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 more, if we have. All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen.